let's go. Hello. So I'm Richard. I'm on the openSUSE board. Okay, you didn't have to clap. Aha! And the board arrives. So, yes, before I get started, slight change of plans for today. When we first planned this out, it was going to be a workshop. We were going to be in a workshop room with power plugs and desks and all this stuff. And that hasn't happened. So instead, we're going to have a presentation. I'm going to do a presentation for about an hour. And then after that, I'm going to stop. There's a marketing boff in the workshop room then. So, and the board are going to have a meeting. But then maybe at 12 o'clock, if there's anyone interested, I'm going to have my laptop. We can sit down, work through some of the stuff that we'll talk about here today. So if you... Yeah. So 12 o'clock, find me. We'll see what we can do. But yes, so I'm on the board. I'm also on the artwork team. And on the artwork team, my role is as maintainer of the branding packages, which I'm going to tell you about what that's all about today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the artwork team, explain what all this branding stuff about, and then go through the details of how we select the designs that we then use when we are theming openSUSE for each version of the distribution, so the default wallpaper, the color scheme, and all of that stuff. How we pick the design, how we put it all together, the stages we go through, what we actually have to change, how we change it, what technical requirements we have, what artistic requirements we have, a little bit about the legal and copyright stuff we have to worry about. And then at the end, there'll be time for questions, and like I say, the workshop at 12 o'clock. So who are the artwork team? Well, we've got a few of them here. We have Marcel at the back. I'm one of them. Carlos is not here. I guess he slept in. Yeah. Victor, Bruno, Andy. We've got a really good team of really enthusiastic people. Some of us are technical people. Some of us are artists. Some of us help out in other ways. But, I mean, you can see what we're up to all the time. I mean, your t-shirts were done by Carlos. Most of the stuff at this conference was done by the community artwork team. They produce t-shirts, they produce the artwork for posters across the community, images for blog posts, business cards. We even do a little bit of work on fonts, wallpapers, the CD sleeves, the booth box. There's a huge range of artwork stuff that we as the community do for openSUSE. Even letterheads for like official letters and stuff like that. Arranging conferences. We did one for this conference. We do one for summits and openSUSE Asia. And in fact, this template itself was done by me as part of the artwork team. So we have a mailing list. It's where most of the artwork team spend most of our time talking. Because we're spread around the world, we try and do some stuff in IRC, but you know, some of us are in Brazil, some are in America, I'm in England. We have, I think, 2 contributors from Asia now as well. So getting us all together at the same time is really, really difficult. So most of the time we're talking about stuff on the mailing list, coming up with new ideas, sharing new concepts. So what a lot of the artwork team spend their time doing is just thinking about what does this look like? What does everyone think of this? You know, maybe for 13.1, maybe for 13.2. You know, I came up with this crazy artistic idea. They'll put together a concept, post it to the mailing list, get feedback, get ideas. As you'll see as I talk about the branding stuff later, a lot of those ideas never end up in the distribution, but it's amazing how many of those ideas end up being part of t-shirt stuff, conference stuff, or other marketing stuff. So we really encourage our artists to be creative, come up with new ideas, and even if we can't promise that we'll get it in like the distribution or in like an official channel some way, we want to see those ideas. It inspires other people. It gets everybody thinking, and that's the best place to get started is our mailing list. The IRC, best place to go if you need help. Just send someone a ping. If one of us is there, we can give you a hand. We can tell you what we're doing, how to do it, and that kind of stuff. And every single thing that the artwork team do, all of those materials, all of the t-shirt designs, everything, all currently lives in GitHub. In GitHub openSUSE artwork, which is the biggest Git repository I have ever seen. It is huge. Yes, if you have a small amount of bandwidth, I'm sorry, it's going to take you days to download it. It's too big almost. We try and tidy it up, and then it just gets bigger, and then we tidy it up again, and then it gets even bigger. I've been speaking to a few people this week. We're trying to come up with a better idea, maybe something like ownCloud, which the artist will still be able to use even easier. But at the moment, just like everything else with openSUSE, it's in GitHub, and download that to your machine, and you'll have every bit of artwork, assets, design ideas that we've ever come up with. Everything's in there. But I'm not really here to speak about the whole artwork team today. I'm going to talk about my one little bit of it, the branding. So when we talk about branding in openSUSE, it's not like the traditional marketing branding in the sense of designing a brand like Coca-Cola and having a consistent image across the world. We're not that kind of project, and SUSE have their marketing team in this. So when we're talking about branding, it's more of the taking the SUSE logo, branding it into our product, and making sure that it's a consistent look and feel for our users, and making the distribution look like a consistent branded product. So we're not talking about defining how the entire project is meant to use our logos and how it's meant to use our designs, but taking that design and actually implementing it as part of the distribution. So when you see the default wallpaper and the login screens, that's us. That's the branding team. At the moment, it's me and Bruno Friedman in Switzerland mainly. It's a lot of work for just two of us, and what I'm really hoping from today is people on the live stream that people get interested, want to start helping out, and actually can start working with me and Bruno to do more stuff. Because as I'll explain at the end, there is a lot of stuff we could be doing that we just don't have time to do. And it's a shame, because people come to us in conferences like this and say, why don't you do this? And I'm like, I'd love to. It's an awesome idea. It's just going to take me 2 days, and I haven't got days to do it. So what do we actually do? Well, we take the designs, the concept, the crazy ideas that the artists are coming up with, and we try and find a way of taking the best of them and using them as the design for a distribution. So 11.4, 12.1, 12.2, 12.3, all of those ideas started as stuff on the artwork mailing list of, why don't we do this? And then me and Bruno took that idea, tried to actually make it work in the distribution in all of the places where we use it. Me and Bruno are not artists. We occasionally dabble and mess around in Inkscape and Photoshop, but we're not making artistic decisions when we're working with this stuff. We are trying to find the technical best solution to get this working in the distribution, and then worrying about making it look good at the same time. But really, we want the artists to be telling us what looks good. They've got a better eye for it than we do. But when it's like the last week of the release, I'll be honest, there's been times when I've just had to make a change, throw it out, and hope that everyone likes it. And normally they do, sometimes they don't. So with the branding, the stuff that actually ends up in the distribution, on the CD, the wallpapers, the splash screens, the logos, the things you see in Grub, the color scheme you see in Yast, while we do the design work for that in the big artwork repo in GitHub, we take it all and put it in the branding repo in GitHub separately. This is where we actually do the work that we use to build the package that goes in OBS, that then lives in the distribution later on. So if you, for whatever reason, want to download the latest wallpaper, and you don't want to do the entire huge artwork GitHub, you can go there, you can download it, you can see it. And if you want to fix anything that you notice is wrong in any of the parts of the distribution, you can put a pull request in there. I will get it. I will almost certainly accept it, because I love it when someone's doing work that I should have been doing. And it's great. So if you want to start contributing, that's where you need to go first. And yeah, a little bit about who here uses GitHub already? Good, brilliant. We've organized it a little bit differently in here than how you traditionally think about it. We leave the master branch completely empty, and we actually make a separate branch for every version of the distribution. We've just done that to stop it getting way too big, like the artwork repo did, and yet still able to keep all of the history of all of the changes. So we now have a 13.1 branch. It looks an awful lot like the 12.3 branch at the moment. But yeah, when 13.2 comes about, we'll do the same thing there. So, and this is where my slide deck goes a little bit weird. So, how do we pick the design? These are the last 3 designs that we worked on for the distribution. And there's 12.1 on the right there. 12.2, where we decided to experiment without a geeko on the wallpaper. And then 12.3, which is the black with the Grub and that nice logo. The first thing we worry about is, does it look good? Obviously, we want our distribution to look nice. We need it to look nice. It's eye-catching. It's the first question we ask, and it's the hardest question to answer, because everybody has an opinion. We go to the project mailing list, we put stuff on social networking, we try and get a good feel for what the community and everybody thinks about it. And everybody will tell you something different. Some people will love it, some people will hate it. It's messy. And the artwork team spends months arguing about this stuff before we even put it out to the community. So we end up, as a branding team, having to just do our best to sort of look at all that feedback and get a feel for what options are really working best, what ideas people are really calling for repeatedly. So let's say with like the 12.3 one, people were telling us it's too busy, it's too loud, it's too noisy. 12.2 was too bright. I wanted it darker, I wanted it simpler, I wanted it cleaner, but I still wanted the geeko. I missed the geeko. So we went for a very dark gray background. The first version of this was just flat gray. People said it was too flat, so we ended up making it a little bit of a gradient, so it starts dark in the corner and lighter later on. But then we put the geeko on there, and we started with just putting the logo on. It looked too boring, it looked far too plain. So that's where the Grow logo from Marcus, one of our other contributors, he decided to do this swirly thing with vines, and it evolved over time to what you see right now. But it is the trickiest part of the whole thing, especially when we quite often go to the community and ask, what do you all think? And we get like 2 responses, and one says he loves it, one says he hates it. If we had 100 responses, it might be a bit easier. So when you see those posts going about on Twitter and Facebook and mailing lists, let us know. Let us know what you think, because it really, really, really matters, and we spend so much time worrying about this bit. It gives us less time for the technical part when we have to get it ready for the deadline, and I'm down to like 2 weeks because I've spent all my time worrying about this first problem. So yeah. And then the next thing we worry about, the legal side. Our product is a product. It's out there in the big wide world. And just like with software licenses, we have to worry about our content licenses as well. We need to make sure that they're open source, that they're freely available, that people can make change. Well, in most cases, we prefer it if the license allows people to make changes. The way our distribution is currently decided, we have to be allowed to freely distribute it. But if you have an artist who licenses his design and says, you must not change it, currently, our current list of accepted licenses will allow it in the distribution. But I'll be honest, it's unlikely to get past me, because if I can't change it, then I'm not likely to be able to use it for everything else I have to do with it. So there is a list there of all the licenses which we use for our content in the distribution. And ideally, we want you, the contributor actually providing it to us, to be the one who has done the artwork from scratch. There has been plenty of times where we've had contributors put something together from places like Flickr or Picasa, and they're great sites, and there's some great stuff out there. And the artist on that site will go and put his lovely artwork and say, it is Creative Commons by share alike license. So it's open source, it's free, it's on our list, it all looks fine. And then we start working on it, and we start putting it in the distribution, and then we realize that that guy in Flickr was lying. And it was actually someone else's work, it wasn't under that license. So it's really important for us to actually know the artist in question, know the full story about everything that's inside the image. So if you see here in my presentation today, every single image I'm using, I can tell you what license the artist did it under, who the artist was, and where I got it from. Because if we make a mistake like this, it's going to be very bad for the community, very bad for the project, and SUSE probably won't be very happy with us either. So it's really, really important, this part. And it can be quite tricky, because the internet, everyone's used to just sharing stuff and throwing it together and done. But just like open source code with the art side of things, it's just as important. And it's sometimes really hard to search for this stuff. So the more you can tell us when you're contributing and saying, yeah, I got this from here, from this guy, and it's this license, and this from here, and that's how I made this design. That's great. That's what we need to know. Technical stuff now. So once we pick the design from an artistic point of view, and we're pretty happy that legally it's not going to get anyone in any trouble, we have to worry about all the technical stuff. As a distribution, we want the distribution to work on as many machines as possible. And that means as many screens as possible. And that means as many computer screen resolutions as possible. And that's a little chart I just grabbed off Wikipedia today of about half of the resolutions computers are using these days. And they start at 102, 4x7, 6.8, and these days they're now going past HD, and you've got 4000 by 4000, and its resolutions are getting higher and higher and higher, and screens are not staying the same size. A couple of years ago, every screen was pretty much 4x3. It was a square. And there was a few exceptions. Graphic artists in particular like to use 5x4. It's a slightly more rectangular arrangement. So originally, openSUSE used to just support those two. And then the world went widescreen and started using like 1610, which was the widescreen that computer screens were using for like 2 or 3 years, pretty much all the time. And then everyone went HD and decided that 1610 actually was too tall and had to be a little bit more squashed, so everything went to 16:9, just like your TVs and like your movie screens. So right now, as a distribution, we have to support at least those 4 aspect ratios, and ideally that at as many different screen resolutions as we can cope without going crazy. That's actually a really big challenge, because if you go back to the artistic side of things, and I'll just jump back a few slides to show you, and then my slide deck goes wrong. Back, there you go. The top design in the top left, that works fine everywhere. It's nice and simple. There's nothing there to really get distorted or squished or cut off. It works. And that's one thing I love about the 12.2 design. It was one of the easiest designs for me to work with those resolutions. However, 12.1, 12.3, we have things like the Vine, the Geeko logo, that nice wispy thing on the 12.1 logo. When you start changing the screen size, and you're not paying attention to what you're doing, that stuff starts getting either squished, squashed, and then looking really ugly. Yeah, 12.1, we made the mistake. Exactly. Yeah, we made a few mistakes in 12.1. We still made a few in 12.3, but less of them, luckily. And sometimes the answer is just cut the edges off. But then you cut the edge off, like the 12.3 logo, and you lose half of the vine, and bits start dropping off the edge, and it starts actually being ugly, or at least less good than it should be. So normally, the easy technical answer for this is using scalable formats, vector-based graphics, things like SVGs, where every element in there it's all one big XML file, and every element is mathematically defined as a vector, as a shape. So when we start resizing stuff, we can resize the element, we can resize the canvas, and it'll keep everything just as we want it, and we can move stuff about very, very easily. So this whole problem about screen resolutions and aspect ratios disappears like a heartbeat. So all those three designs you saw previously, they are all vector-based formats, because at the moment that's the only thing I want to work on. However, there's a bit of a problem with that. The world out there, lots of artists, photography in particular, well, photography, that's never going to be vector-based. That's a PNG file or a JPEG, what we call raster-based formats. You can't go and define a photograph in a vector. So those kind of designs at the moment, we can't really use in the distribution, because we haven't really got an easy answer for sorting out the different aspect ratios and the different screen resolutions. So we prefer SVG. It makes my life easier. If we have an artist come with us with a design for something using JPEG or PNG or another raster bitmap format, we will do our best to work with them. And we will try and find a way to take that design and still keep it looking good and cut it up for these different screen resolutions. But I'll be honest, last time I tried it, it didn't work out too well. We just couldn't find a way to make it work. So Inkscape, Adobe Illustrator, the vector-based tools, those are the ones we're currently using on the branding team to make this stuff work. And other designs end up being done in Photoshop or in GIMP. We end up trying to put them in other packages, in like community wallpaper packages, to encourage people to still have it as part of the distribution, but it will never be part of the core branding that we use everywhere in the distribution. And then, last but not least, smaller file size. This was my mistake in 12.3, and I put my hand up and say sorry to everybody. I made the wallpaper for 12.3, and I didn't pay attention to how big the files were getting. And they were getting bigger and bigger because the artists were coming up with more and more cool ideas, and they were working, and I was shoving those ideas in the package. And then I push all of that to factory, and then Kulo starts screaming at me. Because I'd managed to make a package that was around about 120 megabytes in size on its own, and that doesn't really fit on the CD very well. It didn't fit on the CD at all, in fact. So we have to try and keep our designs technically efficient and the file sizes as small as possible, because that does actually have a big impact on our users. People want to have their init RD, their boot parts for their system, as small as it needs to be, especially if they're installing several different kernels. They don't want to have 7 different copies of my boot splash logos. Or at least they don't want those 7 different copies to fill up the 100 megabytes of space they've given for their boot partition. So for 13.1 and every other version in the future, we're going to be spending a lot more time looking at this, making sure that the design can be made to be very, very small and efficient, and still work, and still look nice, and still be legal, and all the other things we have to worry about at the same time. So how do we put all this together? What do we actually do? Well, this is a short list of about 75% of the stuff we have to change in every single version of the distribution. We have Grub, which is the legacy bootloader, which used to be the default. We have Grub 2, which has a totally different way of doing its designs, and in fact gives us a ton of new options. If you saw in 12.3, Bandito-san made a really nice new design for us. So if you load your system up in Grub 2, you get one very, very nice splash screen and menu system for picking your version. But if you load up Grub 1, you get the old-fashioned one because we didn't have time to change it to make it look the same. And in fact, Grub 1 will never look the same because I can't use colors the same way that I can on the new one. So I have to use white. And that kind of limits my options. GFX Boot, which is the menu system for the live CD. We currently brand or change the splash screen when you load up GIMP, or we used to. 12.3, we stopped doing it. GNOME, there is a default wallpaper in GNOME to worry about. And in fact, GNOME has an option of doing dynamic wallpapers that change throughout the day. So in previous versions, we've had it so at night time, the wallpaper was very, very dark, and then it got to like sunrise, and we made it very, very bright, and then midday it was even lighter, and then we made it go back down again. We try our best to use like all the special little features that we get in all these different parts of the distribution, and that means more work for us, but hopefully it also means it looks nicer for everybody when they're using it. KDE is a fun one because there's actually 3 different areas where we have to worry about the branding. There's KDE Libs, which is where all of the KDE Qt applications pull their branding settings from, and wallpapers and color schemes and all that stuff. There's KDE Plasma, the actual desktop and how that looks. And then there's KDM, the login screen, which is probably the nastiest thing I've ever had to work on. It's just horrible. I mean, every time we just about make it look okay, and then something breaks, or we've forgotten something. In like 12.2, we managed to accidentally delete the field for logging into a domain on the Windows network. So it made it look very nice, but then no one could log on to a Windows network. Really quite painful. And then once you actually log into KDM, there's 2 different splash screens depending on which version you log into, or which settings you pick. So we currently have to brand both of those. LibreOffice I mentioned there, but actually LibreOffice has changed recently. I used to do all of the branding for LibreOffice, but one of the LibreOffice developers now is deciding to change the splash screen themselves, and they're doing it their way. So that's why it looks a little bit different from everything else, but it kind of works nicely because LibreOffice is green anyway. So it fits, it doesn't really look out of place. So we're probably going to stick with LibreOffice having its own design, its own splash screens, at least for now. Then there are the wallpapers. We have obviously the default wallpaper that everyone sees when they do a fresh install, but there's other packages that have quite a large range of wallpapers. Some, like there's the old Novell and the old SUSE ones. There's an extras one. This year I'm hoping to build a community wallpapers package, which is basically going to take all of the other designs which we're not going to be using for 13.1 and take them together, put them in this one big package which people can install and see all the good stuff that our artwork team are making. XFCE, I missed that LXD. Oh well. Yeah, XFCE have a few branding things we do. LXD actually, the reason I didn't mention it, LXD actually just pretty much inherits everything else, so it's nice and easy. It's no work for me. And then finally there is Yast, and Yast has the installer part during the first bit of the disk, and that's really quite interesting on how we have to brand and work with that. The whole thing's done in CSS, or slightly modified CSS files, and in fact there's a CSS editor hidden away inside Yast. You can find it by pressing Control, Alt, Shift and S when you're doing an installation on Yast, and this little CSS editor pops up, and you actually can type in there your CSS, click Apply, and it changes in Yast. It's really nice. So we then do all of that, make it look pretty, and then take out that CSS, put it inside the branding. Oh, and I've also missed out Enlightenment, but Enlightenment was, has currently been themed by the Enlightenment guys. Thomas did his presentation yesterday, I think it was. He's been speaking to me today, and we're going to try and tie Enlightenment in with the rest of how we do all the branding, because I'm about to explain. It's a pretty involved process where we actually use a script that runs upload to automate as much of it as we can. So if we're doing this all once, we might as well try and bring other projects in and keep them involved, so we're not having to repeat all the extra work. And I mentioned the script, so here it is. This is still, yeah. When did you write this, Bonson? A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. This script, it's the make file inside the branding repo on GitHub. And what it basically does now, I don't know what it did when it started, but it takes 4 SVG files, one for each of the 4 aspect ratios, which we have to worry about, that I'm adding at the slide. Takes those 4 files, runs through a whole bunch of different scripts, and will produce all of the different JPEGs and PNGs of certain sizes and certain color depths and whatever, for everything that I just mentioned on this list. So the idea is we start with 4 SVGs, and we end up with around about, I think it's more like 100 JPEG, bitmap, PNG, smaller SVG files, all in this rather complicated folder structure. There's some things this script can't do. One I've already mentioned, it cannot handle the source design being a raster file, being JPEG. So because it ends up being 100 places where we have to change everything, when we need to do raster, if we want to do a raster design as the default design for openSUSE 13.2 or something, we're going to have a different script. And someone's going to have to find a way of writing it. Or someone's going to have to find a way of doing all of that work by hand, which will take a very, very long time. Especially when there are some things that don't make sense to do in the script already. Like Plymouth, the bootloader that you see after the menu, but before your login screen. Bootloader, loading splash, has a very interesting scripting engine of its own. So you can do very, very smart stuff, like you might have seen in 12.3. We start with a blank version of the wallpaper, without the vine, without the Geeko. We start with that. And then we have a Plymouth script that's running, that Raymond Wutnick made, and I helped because it was a bit buggy. That script checks the progress of your boot as it's going along. And as the boot progresses and gets nearer to 100%, there is the vine and the... Go back a few slides now. Oh, there we go. Then there's the vine and the Geeko, and we use Plymouth to fade that in at the same time. That's how you get the boot process looking where it starts gray and then it fades in and then you get the login window. But there's no easy way for us to do that in a script. And even if it was, it's something we kind of like to do by hand anyhow, because Plymouth has so many different options and our design is almost certainly going to call for different ideas every release. So we're doing the Plymouth stuff by hand anyway. The more stuff we can do in the script, the better. So when that script runs against those 4 SVG files, you end up with a whole bunch of files in a folder, and in fact you end up with a tar.gz file, and we send that tar.gz file to the branding package in OBS, along with changes to the spec file if we need it, all the other stuff that we have to do for a package, change logs obviously, otherwise Kulo and me are going to say no. And that becomes the branding-OpenSUSE package. And that package actually has a whole ton of sub-packages. So when you see Grub-branding-OpenSUSE, that's actually just a sub-package of the main branding package. So if you want to change how Grub looks, you have to change the package that changes how everything looks, which can be a bit scary when you start out, because you make one mistake and you can really make factory look ugly. It's kind of what factory's there for, but I still don't like making it look ugly. But not all packages that end in branding-openSUSE actually come from this package. If it's artwork related, it comes from here, pretty much. I mean, Enlightenment and LibreOffice are the exceptions, but you can pretty much say it comes from this package. But there are a few other branding packages, like GIO, and what's the other one we use in GNOME on some? Some other weird ones. Yeah, GTK, some other, and there's a Qt branding package as well. Those branding packages are really for default settings for the distribution. So they don't really come under the heading of artwork, and although they share the name, I'm not responsible for them. I don't look at them that much unless it's a GNOME one, in which case I'm normally helping out with it. But it's all in OBS. You can see how it's all linked together and where everything's linked in. So, 13.1. My to-do list at the moment for the branding. I kind of forgot to mention the most important thing. For the first time that I can remember, we are not going to have a new design for 13.1. Basically, everybody liked 12.3 so much, we decided we'd stick with it. No one gave us negative feedback, so for the first time, 13.1 is going to still have the Gecko with the vine. And there might be some slight changes, but on the whole, it's the same design. So we're going to spend the time instead doing things like this, working with the community, figuring out if we can get more volunteers to help us in the future, and spending time tidying up what we didn't quite get right in 12.3. So the first thing, like I mentioned, we need to make the files smaller. We need to, even though we want to keep it looking pretty much exactly the same, I'm getting my thinking cap on and messing around with SVGs and finding out other ways of doing things to actually get that wallpaper looking the same. But instead of being 60 megs, I want it to be 6 megs in size. And I'm about 30 megs off at the moment. So that's like priority number one. So if anyone here knows how to do lots of wonderful stuff in SVGs, in particular things like noise or speckle effects, please tell me, help. I need it. And yeah, hopefully we reckon if we can, because at the moment the SVG file we have for 12.3, it's mainly vectors, and then we cheated and we took a couple of JPEGs and we shoved them in the background in order to get that grainy effect you get on the wallpaper. And that's what made the file so big. So we want to take the JPEGs out, just have it as an SVG file, and have the noise there as vectors rather than as a JPEG that we just shoved in the back. From the GNOME side of things, the dynamic wallpaper that I mentioned, we didn't have time to get it right in 12.3. In fact, I kind of cheated. I just put 4 versions of the same wallpaper in, so it does change, but it changes from the same color to the same color to the same color, which is really ugly. The main problem with that has not been time or technical problems or anything. I just don't have any ideas on how we should change that wallpaper during the day. So if anyone comes up with any ideas, I can show them where it is. There's lots of options in GNOME of, instead of just fading in, you can do fancy transforms and swapping stuff in and weird and wonderful stuff like that. If anyone wants to look at it and come up with an interesting way of making GNOME look prettier and change throughout the day, just talk to me, go to the artwork mailing list. That would be great. Next thing we really want to sort out for 13.1 is KDM. It's a tricky one, because it's somewhat technical and somewhat artistic at the same time. KDM is a pain, like I mentioned. It's a real pain, it's horrible. And it's horrible from an artist's point of view, and it's quite horrible from a technical point of view as well. So, at the moment we're trying to figure out, either from a branding perspective, how we can make KDM look nice and work, and keep working. Or, there are some questions about whether we should just give up and, technically speaking, stop using KDM as the login screen for KDE. That's a much bigger question. I'm not going to say start sending delete requests on OBS and annoying all the KDE people. But it's a discussion that we are trying to have, trying to figure out what the KDE community feel like and what they would like as a login screen for their systems. And if KDE changes, and we can make the KDE one look nice enough and still work and cover all the other use cases that the login screen has to worry about, then that leads to another question of maybe XFCE, LXDE, Enlightenment could all actually use the same login screen. I purposely avoided saying GNOME because I personally think GNOME looks best with GDM. And that's my opinion, I'm sticking to it. But for the other desktop managers, maybe it would be nice to have everything unified. So if you're logging on an openSUSE machine, it's going to look like one nice, consistent, stable thing. It's a long discussion to have. It probably won't be fully answered for 13.1, but we still have to fix KDM because it's a mess. The Enlightenment guys, they want to be more involved in the branding side of things. I don't know why. I actually think they did a really wonderful job on their own. But so we're going to try and take their stuff, work it in with that script and our package at the moment, and find a way of. And also, Enlightenment has some very interesting ways of doing its theming and doing its wallpapers and all that stuff. So we're going to find a way of taking our design, seeing how much of it we can implement in Enlightenment with them, or at least just work closer together and bring everything into one big place. Bit technical, but there is the branding dash based on openSUSE packages at the moment. They were made for a legal reason. Our current trademark guidelines for the openSUSE logo has rather robust restrictions on when people can use it. So if, for example, with SUSE Studio, someone is making an openSUSE version and they don't want to call it openSUSE, they want to call it something else, we still want them mentioning that it's based on openSUSE. So these packages were made before my time, and back then they worked. But now, with the way we're packaging everything else up and the way the distribution's moved on, they're getting in the way and quite often actually screwing up people's machines because they want to do something slightly differently or change which branding package they're using. Maybe they want to use the upstream branding. And these packages keep on coming in, conflicting, kiwi bits break, it all just gets really, really messy. So I'm going to, me and hopefully other people as well, will be either fixing them, or if we can't fix them, removing them, which probably wouldn't be that good because we do kind of need them for the trademark guideline thing. So maybe moving them elsewhere into their own repository so they're at least not messing up people who are running factory and running 13.1. We're already doing this, but the application splash screens for GIMP, for LibreOffice, for, I'm trying to remember the other ones now, we want to stop branding them. They look nice, it's nice to have a consistent design, but the upstream projects in question do very nice designs themselves. It's their product. We like to, openSUSE likes to be showing off other people's products too. So, and it's more work for us, and we have a lot of other stuff on our plate. So we're going to try and stop rebranding upstream projects, applications, and stick to focusing on branding our stuff instead. And like I already mentioned, community wallpapers. We really, really want to be showing off what our community is doing. And given we have to worry about the technical and the legal and the other issues when it comes to the main design for the main distribution, we want to take as many of those community wallpapers. We still have to worry about the legal issues of the community wallpapers, but there's far less technical worries about a community design because it doesn't have to work on every single screen resolution. It won't have to work right on every single aspect ratio. So we're going to take those designs and put them in a package, and have that package as part of 13.1. Yeah, so that's the plan. I'm currently going through the submissions now, figuring out which ones actually work, fit, look good generally, but yeah, they will be there. So if you're interested, please help. Go to the artwork mailing list, go to the IRC channel, speak to me while I'm here for the rest of the day. We're really, really interested in getting more people involved in the artwork side and the branding side. Any questions?
Maybe you already mentioned, but I missed. I'm just thinking maybe someone majoring in art and really good at drawing and designing, but I'm not sure if our process of submit work, GitHub, for example, will block them.
Yes, I agree. It's something that we've been talking about because, yeah, from an artist point of view, it's not as easy as it could be. Not as easy as it probably should be. And from the artwork team side, GitHub with a repo, especially that big, it's a real pain to work on. So for the sort of initial submission side of things and the artwork team collaboration together, I'm looking at other options. Something like OwnCloud maybe running on the openSUSE infrastructure. So that would be a nice, easy web interface. Someone could log in, put their ideas on there, and then when they go to the mailing list and say, look at this, it's very easy for everyone to find, to change, to contribute to, etc. When it comes to the specific part of the branding bits that end up in the distribution, that's going to stay in GitHub. It kind of needs to stay in GitHub. That's because that's how we actually work on the package. So the artwork side, the side that the artist will be working on, yes, I would like to see that outside of GitHub.
Yeah, I just took a quick go through GitHub webpage, and I think if we provide a mailing list or the email address for this kind of people, that will be helpful.
Yeah, good. Yes, definitely.
Hello, I have 2 questions. The first one is, do you get any feedback from people who are not in the openSUSE community?
Not that much feedback. We spend a lot of attention on feedback from the press. So when the open source community and the press are reviewing our distribution, we definitely love it when they say nice things about the artwork, which for the last 2 releases they have. But when it comes to sort of the general big wide world, no, we don't currently get any feedback from that. And that's something I'd like to fix. It's also something that Andito-san is trying to fix as well. One of our artwork guys, he's putting lots of stuff on social media, social networking, getting people to try and give feedback. We have the openSUSE Artwork Google Plus page. So we're trying. But at the moment, it's going to interest openSUSE people more than it's going to interest anyone else. So we're always going to have more openSUSE feedback. And we kind of care about the community more than we care about everyone else. You know, if you're using openSUSE, we want it to look good for you. If you're not, then we don't mind quite so much.
Okay, and the next one is a bit technical. In the quest for smaller file sizes, would it be acceptable to bypass SVG limitations the following way? Suppose you have this nice noise effect you want to add in your wallpaper, but the result of this effect is hard to describe in a few kilobytes of size. Would it be acceptable to have some program like GIMP in batch mode or ImageMagick generate this effect on some template, SVG template? After the distribution is installed.
That's kind of what we're doing already. I mean, PatchMagick is what the script uses PatchMagick a lot to do a lot of that stuff. The trick is, well, okay. First, why is the current one so big? The current one is so big because even though it is an SVG, technically speaking, it's an SVG with 4 JPEGs in it because I couldn't figure out how to do the noise properly. So one of our artists helped out by doing the noise in a JPEG, and he put that JPEG in the SVG 4 times to get the noise looking right. So we have a hybrid SVG that actually has this big, noisy JPEG stuff at the back, and that is why the file is so big at the moment. If we get those JPEGs out, it looks ugly, but it's much, much smaller. And I reckon there are ways like PatchMagick and other stuff that you can make that SVG have the noise in it, or yes, put the noise in as part of the process of converting everything. I kind of neglected to mention it here, but pretty much every single one of these products that we brand has different requirements when it comes to file size, file type, file format, color depth. It's amazing how many different open source projects can't decide, oh yeah, we're going to have a wallpaper at the back and it needs to be like this. So Grub does one thing, Grub 2 does something completely different, GFX boot needs something completely different. In fact, GFX boot needs like 1 million different JPEGs because it can't figure out aspect ratios at all. So we have like every single resolution you could ever possibly have with a different file. So yes, we're using Patch Magic a lot to do all that conversion and the magic with there, but the initial file, that's why the initial file really has to be an SVG of some kind at the moment, because that's where we're doing, that script is where we're doing all that conversion to make it happen. So it gets tricky if I want Patch Magic to start embedding new stuff in there, because I have to make sure it embeds it right in all of the other formats that we're using, and and it looks good in everything. I'm not saying we can't do it. I'm just saying that's like one of the big challenges we have with making everything smaller.
What I'm talking about is letting image magic, instead of having this raster noise effect from the artist who created it, instead of this, get a set of rules that the artist used, and let these rules be evaluated after the distribution is installed, and apply those rules to SVG images, then create the raster images, and use them for branding.
Yeah, I like that idea. Let's talk about that afterwards. Come up with some ideas for the rules. We've got some stuff like that already, but I think it would be nice to do more and get it better to stop it happening again, because we definitely made it too big this time. Any other questions? Aha, you're too late. That's all right. Oh yeah. Thomas, Enlightenment guy, I just mentioned you. One of the things I want to do, Enlightenment in the branding package. But yeah, any other questions?
Hello.
Hello.
Not much of a question, rather than a proposal. I mean, when we're talking about marketing, it's usually good, I think, to have, apart from the generic strategic of the project, in marketing, it would be nice to have local ones. I mean, from country to country, the mentality is different. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, the artwork team is. Let me go to the slide. In fact, I'll jump there quickly to do it this way. One moment.
Yep.
Go to the artwork team. They will love that idea. I mean, they're doing it already for like Greece and countries that ask them. They love making new stuff for these different regions. They're very happy to do it. So I don't see us, from a branding distribution perspective, doing different versions of the branding in the distribution for different countries. I think that's a bit too much work for us at the moment. If we get enough volunteers from stuff like this, and maybe for 13.2, but not right away. But for general marketing, artwork stuff, you want posters, you want images for blogs, you want images for web pages, whatever. Those are your guys to speak to. They will be more than happy to help.
Yeah, that was exactly my idea. Not for the main distribution, but for the other stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So we go there.
Yeah, go there. Or if you see Carlos or Marcel or me, I mean, definitely.
Good.
No problem.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, that's it then. So if anyone's interested in actually sort of getting down and dirty with the branding package, I will be in the room just across the way from 12 o'clock with power and laptops and all that stuff. So in an hour's time. But I have nothing else right now, so if you have no questions, do you? No? Good. Okay. Thank you very much. We had a change of plans.